All right, Sagar, what's on your radar?
Well, as you all know, one of the things that concerns me most about a Joe Biden presidency is how this administration is going to handle the Communist Party in China. And on that front, I believe that the results are going to be mixed. On one hand, you can generally say Trump's most successful win in Washington was changing the conversation around China. There are almost no elements of elite society outside of libertarian economists that will argue that allowing China unfettered access to U.S. markets is a good thing, or that it is good for all of us if big business is wholly in bed with the Chinese Communist Party. This is an ideological victory and the frame through which the Biden administration is going to have to operate. But, and this is the big but, how exactly that manifests itself in policy is going to matter more than anything. And more as we see the people inside the administration, I have a sinking feeling that on a practical level, nothing of real consequence will be done to hit China where it really hurts, which is their relationship and access to our largest financial institutions. One way that you can always tell how exactly someone's policy is being received versus rhetoric is to look at how the people who will supposedly be affected by such rhetoric are reacting. Now, if they're freaking out, it's fair to say it's probably legit. But if they're not, then they know exactly what empty talk looks like. Luckily for us, we actually have some insight into how exactly some in China are looking at a Biden presidency. The clip I'm about to show you is from Professor Di-Dong Sheng. He is the Vice Dean of International Relations at Renmin University in China, Vice Director and Secretary of the Center for Foreign Strategic Studies of China, as well as a high-profile member of the Chinese Communist Party. He recently gave a talk in China, which was translated, and what he has to say is truly shocking. Let's take a listen.
那么，这个中美贸易战过程中，他们也试图帮忙啊。据我所知，美方的朋友跟我讲，这个试图帮忙，但是啊力有不逮啊。但现在呢，现在我们看到拜登上台了，传统的精英、政治精英啊，这个建制派，他们跟华尔街的关系是非常密切的。所以大家看到吧，拜登的儿子被特朗普说你在全球有什么基金公司，发现没有？谁帮他建的基金公司啊？明白吗？这里边都有买卖啊。那么，所以这个
It's right there in the open. Chinese international relations professor, deep ties to the higher up in Beijing, saying this quiet part out loud, that the traditional political elite and establishment connected to Wall Street will be much easier to pressure in doing their bidding on a range of different public policies. And just so we're clear, I have run that translation by experts fluent in Chinese who tell me it is accurate. And I encourage you all to go watch that full clip, because it makes it clear just how close Professor Dongsheng is to the regime. He was tasked with setting up a book event for Xi Jinping in 2015, right here in Washington. He describes how hard it was to do so, how he ran into some obstacles, that at the last minute, it was taken care of by the head of an Asian global markets division at a major Wall Street bank. What is so disgusting about all of this is how out in the open it all is. A Chinese professor can just say it at the equivalent of a TED Talk, and everybody's laughing. As for the banks themselves, they're shameless. In a new report from the Wall Street Journal, they basically sent a signal to China that they did all they possibly could during the trade war under Trump in order to undermine it. The Journal describes how in February 2018, when Beijing's chief negotiator was here in D.C. for trade negotiations, he convened a roundtable of Wall Street executives where he said, quote, "We need your help." The people there were Larry Fink of BlackRock, David Solomon, number 2 at Goldman and now the CEO, and CEO of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon. Literally the most powerful people in finance. Now, according to the Journal, the Chinese dangled something shiny in front of these banks. They told them, in exchange for their help in bringing political pressure to bear against Trump, they would then give these firms a new opportunity to expand in China and make money beyond their wildest dreams. And through aggressive lobbying, they were able to get something done that pleased their Chinese masters. The Journal reports how JP Morgan was rewarded with full ownership of a venture in China. Morgan Stanley became controlling owners of their Chinese ventures. Citigroup won a custodian license of securities held by funds in the country, while BlackRock won preliminary approval to start wholly owned mutual fund businesses in China. A huge win. The last one is the most important, as it relates to how BlackRock CEO Larry Fink was very aggressive in letting the Chinese know that he would do anything, absolutely anything, to help them in Washington, as long as it meant he could get broader access to their markets. Well, viewers of this show may recall, who exactly is Larry Fink's former chief of staff? Yes, you remember, Wally Adamio. He's the former head of the Obama Foundation. And Larry Fink's chief of staff, who was about to be the #2 at the Treasury Department under Janet Yellen and Joe Biden. Wally is not going to be alone in Washington. He will be joined by Brian Deese, who will become the new Larry Kudlow of the Biden administration. Brian is joining the administration from where? You guessed it, BlackRock, as head of their climate investment team. The former apparatchiks of one of the largest fund managers in the world, and by all accounts, essentially someone who wants to sell this country out for a quick dollar, are now going to be some of the most powerful economic official in Joe Biden's Washington. And is it going to make a difference? Time's going to tell, but the Chinese certainly seem to think so. I found that clip really stunning, Crystal. He's just like, it's almost, I was like, wait a second, this can't be real, right? I was like, this is just too on the nose. No, ran it by a friend of mine who's an expert who speaks Chinese. He's covered the Chinese. He's like, oh yeah, totally legit. He's like, I know Di Zhongsheng, all of that. The real gross part of this is when Di Zhongsheng is telling a story about Politics and Prose, a great bookstore here in D.C., where they hold events. Xi Jinping wanted to hold an event there in 2015. And so he was like, I went to the shop owner and I said, Xi Jinping wants to speak here on this date. And the shop owner apparently had been a journalist in Asia and hated China. And he was like, the date's already booked up. So he was like, give me the name of the guy. And he goes, and I'll give him this. Yeah, he just says this out there. And he goes, well, I couldn't figure it out because this arrogant shopkeeper, that's what he calls him, he's like, wouldn't do what I asked him to do. And so I called the higher-ups in Beijing and I said, this is a problem. A day later, they called me back. They said, it's all good. Go meet this woman. He goes, and I meet this white woman. And he uses anti-Semitic language in order to describe her and more. And she's like, she had a perfect Beijing accent. And she was the head of global Asian operations at a major Wall Street bank. And he keeps going to the audience. He's like, do you understand? That's how it works over there. And it's like,
you know what?
He just says it. He says it outright.
You kind of get the sense that they have a clear understanding of how this country really works than we do ourselves.
Yes.
Because what is the true seat of power in this country? It's not really the government.
No.
It is Wall Street. It is corporate America. And so, you look at the Biden administration staffed up with all these people. I was just looking at Cedric Richmond, who we've covered here. He's a top advisor in the White House.
Yeah.
He told the Wall Street Journal CEO Council that he hopes to be that conduit for CEOs straight into the White House. Those were his words, promising to them that they're going to have a direct line into the White House. Where's the promise that working class people are going to have a direct line into the White House? But yeah, you get the sense, they've so effectively weaponized money and capitalism against ourselves.
And he says it. They just say it.
He says it, and he lays it out right there.
Yeah.
Like, they actually really understand. We sort of lie to ourselves about what this country is really about. No, they see it very clearly, and so are able to exploit that and use it to their own ends. And yeah, look, the Biden administration, it's grotesque. And look, I get it. This is the way that administrations are always staffed up. Trump administration on all kinds of Wall Street cronies as well, and business as usual types. So I'm not saying this is unusual, but that doesn't make it any less grotesque that person after person after person is on major corporate boards, Wall Street, private equity, hedge funds, just every single one of them. And part of why that is because they're all so quick after the Obama administration. They were all so quick to run out and cash in on their quote-unquote public service. Like, that's really what they're doing here. They're all in it to make money. And so when it comes to staffing and administration, if you're going to look to the standard issue Democratic establishment types, they're all corrupt. Yeah, every single one of them.
And take a look. Like, Wally is the perfect example. He was, in the Obama administration, senior international economic advisor in the National Security Council, chief negotiator of TPP under Obama, right? Which sold out so much of American business. Then leaves the administration, becomes chief of staff to Larry Fink, BlackRock fund manager, leaves that to become head of the Obama Foundation, and now #2 at the Treasury Department. This is huge. Again, BlackRock. People were saying the Trump White House was Goldman's time in the barrel. It's like now it's BlackRock's time. Because now you got Brian Deese in there, you got Wally Adamio, and look, as we all know, it's really about who has your phone number. So whenever Wally's former boss, Larry Fink, is like, hey, can you maybe hold off on this in order to, make sure that we're okay in this deal with China? I think he's going to say yes. And the reason I know that is because All of those Wall Street guys were rewarded by the Chinese for doing exactly that with the Trump administration, with that trade deal. And the Trump administration, look, I'll always give them credit for the trade war and so much more. There were several carve-outs for major financial institutions, and they were gifted billions of dollars in Chinese capital for lobbying. You think they don't have this down to a science? And you can just see how this is going to escalate itself over the next couple of years. Look, I mean, sometimes you find a clip that just says it all.
Yeah.
And that's he's just out there in public at a TED Talk. And he's just like, yeah. He's like, Biden's corrupt and we're going to use it. And he even said, he's like, yeah, maybe we'll give him a little gift on the first day because that's how these things work.
The Hunter Biden comments.
Yeah.
As well, which we weren't supposed to talk about during the election. That was off. That was debunked. That was all debunked. Yeah.
Don't tell Adam Schiff.
No, I mean, look, we know how solicitous the Obama administration was of Wall Street.
Terrible.
If they even mildly, remember Obama would like so mildly, gently criticize Wall Street, and they'd be like, "Oh my God, class warfare! How could you?" And he'd be like, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." So I think we all know how this is going to go.
Yeah, that's right. All right, I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.